Welcome to the new sound of online radio. Welcome to the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network. 'Cause you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven. A mix of today's hits and hard-to-find favorites, combined with the most entertaining and intriguing talk anywhere. This is your sound. This is the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network at UBNradio.com.
Stay that way because I like it like that.
Hello, and welcome to the Larry Yates Says Is show. Thank you for all being there, and Larry Yates is traveling. We wish him well and salute him as he does his work around the world. This is Reverend Carolyn Wilkins, and I'm delighted to be the host and producer this week. The topic of our show is How Did We Get Here? And we're continuing that series, but today we're going to focus on liberty. Liberty, the idea of liberty and freedom. When we talk about liberty, what are you thinking of? Yesterday was the 4th of July, the Day of Independence. And I believe it meant different things for different people. For some, it was parades. For others, it was veterans. For others, it was fireworks. And for some, it was friends and family getting together. But I know that there were speeches. I attended several celebrations. Some were more serious than others in proclaiming liberty and singing the Star-Spangled Banner, and others questioned, what is America standing for these days? Our Declaration of Independence talks about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And is that in jeopardy today? We're going to look at liberty from 3 or 4 different standpoints. One will be in regard to how we speak of liberty for immigrants, especially the immigrants of today. Another is how we speak of liberty for those who protest, and how we react to the protesters. And there'll be an instance of an interesting reaction and another instance of, let's talk about this a little more. So let us begin. The idea of liberty. The definition of liberty is the state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's way of life, behavior, or political views. I actually think that that definition is very liberating because it talks about restrictions by authority on a way of life. That could easily touch on many of the things that have come to the Supreme Court. It also looks at behavior. So if we're looking at behavior, whose behavior are we protecting? Whose behavior are we penalizing? Or political views. The idea that this society, this country, was designed to allow us all to have a sense of freedom and liberty in our political views. We're going to investigate this further. Another definition of liberty that I found is freedom from captivity or control. Freedom from captivity or control. So if you look at liberty from that standpoint, you may wind up going down an entirely different path, which we're also going to do. So let's look at these beginning ideas of liberty and go back to the conversation that we had last week regarding the immigrant families, the separation of families at the border, and what is happening to these children. We spent time talking about that. I also had a forum with over 20, 30 people who came together to talk about their concern, their disappointment, their frustration, and really sadness about what our country is doing, ICE as well as the Border Patrol. And most who expressed their views said that they knew that our country stood for something grander, something higher, something more profound, something that declared freedom and liberty for all. And the way we were dispensing our welcome at the border was very different. Because as I mentioned last week, or if you're hearing this at a different time, there are very few people who are citizens of the United States whose parents or themselves did not come as immigrants. So we're looking at freedom of coming into a country, freedom to have the right to due process, freedom to work, freedom to have a family, freedom to vote. All of those are ideas under our sense of liberty. When we look at our border children and the fact that they have been moved around to about 17 different states in over 100 detention centers and separated from their parents, the way we are treating immigrant families has made our entire the world stop and look at what the United States is doing. It is not what we have purported to do. It's not what the history has shown. Our first slide showed the Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty declares, "Give us your poor, you're tired." It invites you in. It invites you to this country. The Statue of Liberty stands at the port of New York City, where most ships came from Europe, and it welcomed people. They look forward to seeing the land of the free, the home of the brave, and seeing the Statue of Liberty, which represented freedom and justice. The Statue of Liberty holds up its arm, the right arm, for justice, with a light shining so that those who come see that they are covered and handled. And regardless of the darkness from which they came, they come to this country for a new sense of light. This image also has next to it the flag, the American flag. And that flag also stands for freedom and justice. So when we're talking about border families and border children, I wonder when we made a change, when we decided that everyone was not welcome, when we stopped and our legislators chose sides. I don't know when that happened. And I ask you all to think about it. Did you elect people to make decisions about that? I know we elected people to manage many things that are happening in this country. Immigration laws are important. And I agree that there might be different rates that people come in, but we should be proportionate in how we dispense who comes into this country, and not dictate that they come from countries where people are of more European background. That's what is happening today. In our Congress, the intent, just like 45 says, is to bring in people from European countries who seem to, he believes, bring more skills. But I've met people from all over the world who are educated. Many came to America to be educated and then have gone back to their own countries and may want to come back again to be a part of the United States of America. But our country is making that more difficult depending on the countries you're coming from, especially if you come from certain countries which have been put on a block, which are more Muslim-oriented countries. They have been questioned. This is also a country that I believe we came together. Our forefathers came together for freedom of expression, freedom of religion. And now we have set aside restrictive entry for those who practice a certain religion. It is not what the forefathers had in mind when they gathered together in Philadelphia and declared who we are, wrote the Constitution, and followed up with the Declaration of Independence. It was a higher ideal, a higher sense of this country. And those people, in fact, fought. They were the culmination of fighting that happened with the British. And the British leaders were not listening to them. They were asking for more freedom, and the British aristocracy said no. So they initially marched and spoke and were very diplomatic in how they did things. And then they finally started doing things with a little more aggression. And as you have seen, perhaps in looking at historical images, it wasn't quiet. The British, who were trying to separate from the authorities, wound up burning things. They tore down buildings. They burned shipments of tea. They knocked over things. It was not a quiet place of liberation. Yet it's interesting that our democracy today wants people who are disagreeing to do it quietly, to do it with civility. That's not how it works. That's not how this country began. So I'd like people to take time to look at history, to know that great changes took great perseverance, took great strategy, lots of people coming together, willing to give their lives for freedom, dignity, and liberty. So I stand today in saying that for these children who are separated and are being given court time without representation, that we must go back to our founding documents and know that we are here to provide liberty and the pursuit of happiness. The children are being reunited slowly but surely. However, most children, there is not a connection with where their parents are. So people are going through due diligence right now, the Department of State, in trying to find what's going on, and the Department of Immigration. There's also a problem because many people have left both organizations because we've been paring down the Department of State. We are hiring Border Patrol agents. We're hiring other people that take care of watching and building, but we're not hiring people necessarily who are in administrative positions, legal positions, to provide due process. We're not necessarily hiring people who can help to transition the children with grace, with compassion, with care. So I encourage you all to decide what you can do. You don't have to march, but you can write a letter. You don't have to protest, but you can buy a teddy bear and send it to a child. You can buy a card that says, "Someone is thinking about you," and make a difference with these children's lives. With the 25 people that we gathered on Sunday, they each declared something that they wanted to stand for as we are looking at these children. And one person said love, another said compassion, somebody else said trust. Let us begin to trust each other again. Let us be able to speak in a way that we can trust that our elected officials are telling us the truth, trust that people who may have a difference of opinion will respect our opinion, and trust that these children will be taken care of. So I continue to hold that in the highest light and invite you all to come up with unique and different ways that we can support all children, in addition to those coming across our border and being separated. I'd like to step into another conversation about liberty. On the 4th of July, at the very footsteps of the Statue of Liberty in New York City, someone protested. Actually, there were a large group of protesters at the Statue of Liberty, and they created a human chain around the statue, and they had a plan, and they had a strategy of what they were going to do. They had signs that they held, and one of the spokespeople said that for some reason, one of the women who were with the group decided to stay. Now, that wasn't part of the plan. It wasn't part of the protest move. They wanted to gather attention. They wanted to speak to people who were there on Liberty Island, which is what it's called, in the port of New York. But Liberty Island wound up being shut down because this one person who decided to stay on the statue, on the foot of the Statue of Liberty, created chaos for everyone else. The person did not leave. In fact, they wound up having the police speak with that person for over 2 hours, and they encouraged them to come down. I attended a different kind of protest a couple of weeks ago in our state capital of Sacramento. And before we went, there was a gathering of people, a division of positions of what we were going to do. There were some people who said they'd be arrested, some who wouldn't. And the leaders all asked that we act with integrity and keep our word in what we said we were going to do. Because when you have a strategy, when you're going into a situation, you want to get the greatest impact of that strategy. So I would bet that the group of people who are protesting here did the same thing. They sat with each other ahead of time, decided on the message, the means, how they were going to handle the situation, and when they were going to leave, who would give the call, and what they would do as they were coming down. What impact they wanted to make, and how it would make a difference in the world. Apparently, the person who stayed at the footsteps had her own way of doing something. And there is something to be said for individualism. However, when you're joining a group, I strongly encourage you to follow what the group's demands are, the group's strategy, the group's intention, because you wind up having a greater impact when you are coordinated in your action. Now, what this person did, I don't know her name, is she created something that became a worldwide scene. So people see her there, but there's a lot of reaction that is angry. Because you have to have tickets to come to Liberty Island and the Statue of Liberty. And people bought tickets way ahead of time so they could be there for the 4th of July celebration. And this act of defiance by this person brought on upset, really frustration that this person would choose to do that. So I understand when people make decisions to act individually, they will deal with the consequences themselves. And at the same time, I imagine we'll hear from her and hear what pushed her to make that decision. I'm actually happy to know that they did not shoot her, handcuff her, or handle her in a disparaging way, because she is a black female, and police have handled people of color in very different ways in the past. We have mourned the death of many young men and some young women who have done something out of order, and when confronted by police, they wound up being shot. So I give my blessings that the police officers carried themselves in a dignified way, were willing to put 2 hours of conversation in on this discussion. And I wonder what they talked about. I wonder if they started to ask her why she was there, what position she had. There haven't been a lot of interviews except about them moving her from the footsteps to the bottom of the Statue of Liberty. But I'm excited to hear the rest of the story. I hope you all are also. There's more to this story to be had, and we'll find out soon what she had in mind. But I still encourage everyone to continue to protest, to speak up, because they were protesting about ICE. They wanted ICE to be abolished and to not be as forceful as they have been in working with immigrants in this country. So I'm going to move into another demonstrator, another person who is speaking out, and that is our amazing Congresswoman Maxine Waters. She is a Congresswoman from California, serving the 43rd District, which is in the Los Angeles area. Yes, I do know Maxine Waters personally. I have been with her on many occasions in messages she's delivered, in meetings that she's been a part of. I've watched her grow and progress and serve this part of Southern California in an unbelievable way. She's very courageous, very brave, is willing to stand up and speak her mind about many things. In the last 2 weeks, though, she has been tweeted about. She has not been protected. She has been called uncivil because of something she said, and almost blackballed in many ways, in a way that I haven't seen in a long time, for encouraging people to speak out and to speak to members of Trump's cabinet. She said if you see them in restaurants or outside, tell them what you feel. It's okay to harass them. And in our last show, we said that it may not be okay to harass on a physical level, but certainly part of our opportunity to protest includes verbal, sometimes language that is not comfortable. Because when we're protesting, it ain't comfortable. I'm not sure what's going on in the media where the media believes that this woman of courage, this woman of dignity, this woman of strong knowledge and opinion, this very intelligent woman who Trump has called someone of little intelligence. I'm going to laugh at that, like he would know. He has been embarrassing, really, in speaking about someone who is very well known, very well educated, and has spent so much of her life speaking out for those who did not have a voice. I want to come back to Maxine Waters after we take a short break. We'll talk more about who she is, what she said, and how this affects liberty on the day after Independence Day.
I was inside your soul the day that you appeared, my love. Contain your heart, but will you remember me? This earth you walk upon, it's holy. Breath you breathe, it's mine. I'm loving you, oh, but will you remember me when the river's rising and the seas are not calm, and the peace you felt on yesterday, today it's nowhere to be found, and you pray to be free, and for the burdens to subside. Let me tell you, hold on. Hold on, now the answer. Pray, yeah. Pray till you realize. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. I was inside your soul the day. I was there the day that you appeared, my love. You see, my love. Oh, my love contained your heart. Oh, but we
and I'm happy to be here. We're talking about liberty today. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And this show is being recorded the day after Independence Day. So our conversation today is about liberty. It's about what we perceive as liberty and also what is happening in our world today around ideas of liberty. I want to put up first a tweet from 45, known as Donald J. Trump, who talks about Maxine Waters being a low IQ person and who has asked for some challenges. She's asked for people to protest. And he says, be careful what you ask for. Now, it sounds to me like if you're saying that somebody should not be asking for trouble or engaging people in a negative manner, then the president should have the understanding to not, in fact, incite more problems by saying, be careful what you ask for. Maxine Waters has, in fact, had to deal with death threats and other things because his tweet keeps riling up people. But I'd like you to hear what she says directly in her voice.
I know that there are those who are talking about censoring me, talking about kicking me out of Congress, talking about shooting me, talking about hanging me. All I have to say is this. If you shoot me, you better shoot straight. There's nothing like a wounded animal.
So what I know of Maxine Waters is she's strong, she's courageous, and she will come back. She's already strong and working and doing what she's doing. And what I am questioning is this conversation about a call for civility. The lack of support for someone who is already in Congress when other people have maligned Trump and other people in Congress, but they haven't been persecuted in the same way. She, in fact, has not been supported by Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic Party. Instead of standing up and saying that we understand what she said, we don't necessarily agree with the position on harassment. However, we understand that it's an encouragement of people to speak up and to use social activism for making a statement of what they're trying to work for. But right now, we hear people talking about civility. And I ask, why now? Why is it because it's Maxine Waters when there have been a series of uncivil, poorly stated, impactful statements made from the Republican side of the world who have incited rioting, they've incited fighting, they've incited picking up guns. One of the things 45 said was he wants our school teachers to be able to pick up guns to shoot back. All of those things are inciting problems in our country. I'd like to have a call for civility, but I don't want it to start with Maxine Waters. I want it to start at the White House. I call for civility from the White House. I call for civility in language, in treatment, in behavior, in actions, in writing, in tweeting, in speaking. I call for civility. I call for compassion, and I call for some level of intelligence in the decisions made. That's my call. I want to step now into the ideas around social action and change, because the news media is not covering this. They just are reactive to what's happening for the moment. And when we have someone like Maxine Waters who speaks up, or someone who is a political activist, you hear their language and then you wonder, have they said too much? Or why are they speaking like that? But I want to tell you the steps to social change. There are 6 steps to social change. One is information gathering. So when you're ready to make a difference in the world, you take a look at your situation. It's really a research project. And you look at the challenges, the problems, the situation, what is going on right now, and what needs to happen. So most groups that have been in civil engagement, civil action, actions for justice and change in our society, have done this work over a period of a year, 2 years, sometimes 7. I saw a video a couple of weeks ago about the movement in Memphis with the garbage strikers. 7 years in the making of information gathering and some of these other steps. So it does not happen quickly. And what's going on now is not new. There's been a lot of information gathering about what needs to happen to make our country more compassionate. The second step to social change is education. So what people have gathered, the group has gathered, they then go out and spread the information on what they learned so that their constituency can better understand the challenges, the problems, the resources, what is available, and what is happening that is a problem, and what are the potential options for going forward. So education is an important piece. When I participated in the Poor People's Campaign, they took 6 months of gathering people in churches around the world, around this country, and got them together to inform them of what is really going on from a standpoint of racial injustice and oppression, from jobs, the war economy, what's happening from our environmental standpoint. They took time to educate people to the depths of the problem. The third thing they did was to ask for personal commitments. Now, no matter what organization that you are a part of, whether it's a new organization or one that is just growing, they ask you to talk to us, come to us, and be a part of who we are. Make a personal commitment. What can you do? Now, different people have different skills, different capabilities, and maybe you are a writer. Maybe you can write content for what they're going to do in a newsletter, or perhaps you can write content for a blog or for social media posts. Perhaps you are a great photographer and you can take pictures of rallies, or you can take pictures of the people who are affected by the change you're trying to make. Perhaps you are a good organizer or a teacher, or you're great at bringing people together. Perhaps you can sing. I worked with Brenda Lee Ager a couple of months ago, and she talked about the work that she had done through her music group that supported the civil rights movement over a decade. They brought their talent of music, and they made a personal commitment to being there. And music helped to move the civil rights work along the way. If we didn't have some of those songs like We Shall Overcome, or Having the Spirit Move Through Me, there are lots of them. Pete Seeger participated. We had Mahalia Jackson singing. We had a series of singers who continued to keep their commitment. Lena Horne, all stepped in with what they could do. We had actors who were orators, who were able to do wonderful things in speaking in front of conferences. We had artists who would draw pictures and who would keep the dialogue going. What can you do is my question. In the 6 steps of social change, personal commitment is step number 3, and it is so important that you choose something you want to work on and commit to what you can do. Step number 4 is negotiation. Negotiation is negotiation in the community. It's negotiation with the people who may have the apparent power. It's negotiation in finding what are they willing to give up, what are they willing to give, where can we compromise, where can we find common ground. Negotiation, whether you're in a union or whether you are fighting for justice and civil rights, there's always a place of give and take. You can put your demands or requests on the table, and the group to which you're speaking, whether it's your city council or the school board, or whether you're talking to legislators, there is conversation and negotiation. It's an important and vital part of any social change, any movement. Dr. King sat down with LBJ. He had sat down with his whole strategic team before he went, and they decided what they wanted, what they could give in on, and points that were non-negotiable. But they did that before they went in the conversation. And they had a conversation with LBJ and encouraged him to support Martin Luther King in his march on Memphis. The March on Washington, the same thing. There was discussion. And all of the major social change movements that have happened, the women's movement, there was negotiation on what can we do, how can we make change. And more recently, we're trying to have negotiations around immigration and social change, but there doesn't seem to be an interest in conversation from one side. That is not part of the American way. Negotiation is part of what happens in all parts of life. Most of you have paid attention to the negotiations and the contracts of our basketball players and baseball teams and football teams, and you may know more about what your local heroes are doing than your state legislators. I encourage you to expand your level of interest, your level of knowledge, and even though I'm excited that certain players are coming to certain areas, I'm more excited when I know that people have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in having their dreams in this country. I'm more excited when I know that we're negotiating with the police and our justice system so that we can get rights and dignity to people who are being arrested for things that they shouldn't be arrested for. I know that there's a better chance of us knowing about negotiations between judges and legislators when they're forming sentences for people of color. Because it's clear to me, and all data shows, that black and brown people who are arrested get longer and more severe sentences than other people do. That's what we need to understand how to negotiate, and that's what we want to put our attention on. I want everybody to be treated in similar ways. The 5th step of social change is direct action. Direct action is when you go and you protest. When you go and stand in front of a building, when you lock arms, arm in arm, and you sing or you speak out or you give your demands. When there's someone with a foghorn who's speaking and yelling, "We shall overcome." Direct action is when you go to the office of the president of a company and say, "We demand that you speak to us." Direct action happens in many different ways depending on what you're asking for. But direct action is part of the process, part of the 6 steps of social change. In our environment today, it's very clear to me that they are trying to take direct action out. They want people to be quiet, polite, write letters. And one of the commentators, a couple of them said, save your anger and go to the voting booth. Voting is one of the ways you have direct action, but it is not the only way. So I speak loudly, I speak clearly, and I invite you all to vote. Voting is very important, but I also invite you to take action so that in your neighborhoods, whether it's small or large, something is happening. I am so proud of people who have been protesting in the streets of every major city, small and large areas, about the children and the immigrant and the family separation situation. I'm proud of people taking direct action, writing signs, walking and speaking to neighbors, doing bake sales so they can get money to send to immigration organizations. They're all direct action and they're all part of the process. And step number 6 is reconciliation and healing. No matter what organization we're talking about, whether it's apartheid in South Africa, whether it's the 100-day killing in Rwanda, where tribes were attacking other tribes. Many places have had challenges. They've had social change. They've had marches. They've had rallies. They've had people reelected. But one of the most important things that is done is step number 6, reconciliation and healing. Because when you negotiate, you come to the table with what you have to offer, but by the time you end the negotiation, you may not have what you wanted, and those who are negotiating may not have received what they wanted. So there's issues on both sides, and you have to come to agreement that it's okay, that we can move forward with what has happened. Let each side have a conversation. Let each side be in a healing process where they listen to each other. They're no longer negotiating. They're just hearing each other, allowing people to speak from their hearts about what was important to them, how the change happened, what is going to happen in their world, in their families, in their communities as a result of this social change, and how they will tell their children that they stood up. And all who are involved in the process of reconciliation will be healed by doing something of this nature. I conduct healing circles in communities. I conduct circles with children, with adults, interfaith, intercultural, and they're always beautiful and amazing. We have women's healing circles where they get to have conversation about relationships, about some of the things they haven't been able to do, about the stories of the grandmothers and the mothers and the power of women that has gone back centuries, has gone back generations. the healing circles of people of the diaspora, where they talk about what happened and what they think they know happened with slavery. Some have gone back to Africa and gotten a better story. Some have heard it from their ancestors, that stories that have been given down. Some have learned it from books, and some are still learning. But all part of a healing process to receive, to talk about, and to open your heart to what has happened in your family and your community. So I appreciate the time to talk about these 6 stages, the 6 key factors of social action. We are going through different times right now, and some of you may think things have gotten worse. But I say, let's pay attention to the vision we have for this moment. Let's pay attention to a higher ideal. Turn our attention to something that we can bring forth. This is a time for freedom. It's a time for self-expression. It's a time that men, women can stand side by side. People of different genders can stand side by side. People in the rainbow of colors can stand side by side and say, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. Let our call for liberty be a true call for liberty. The state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's way of life, behavior, or political views. I end the program by saying again, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. Peace to all, freedom to all, and liberty to all.